She clinked her wine glass against mine and said it like a punchline. Cheers, we're divorcing. Already posted about it. She smiled so wide I could see the back molar that still had lipstick on it. People at the next table looked over. She didn't care. No, she wanted an audience. The wine in her glass was still swirling when I reached into my blazer and pulled out the house keys. I placed them next to her fork like I was handing over a tip. Good luck tomorrow, I said. No anger, no raised voice, just those 4 words. Then I stood up, tucked in my chair, and laid 2 crisp hundreds on the table. The waiter rushed over with a polite nod. I nodded back. Melissa tilted her head like a confused dog, her lips parting slightly. Wait, what? She asked. But I didn't answer. I was already walking out the door, past the ballet stand, into the cooling night air. She kept laughing behind me. I could hear it even with the door shut. She thought she had me by the throat. She had no idea she'd just cheered her way into a coffin of her own design. And for the record, if you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, it really helps the team behind the scenes bring you more stories like this. Over 90% of you are tuning in without subscribing. It's one click, but it motivates us more than you know. Now, back to her little victory dinner. See, Melissa had always been theatrical. Not in a charming, eccentric way. More like, needs the spotlight or she'll die, kind of theatrical. If it wasn't on social media, it didn't happen. If no one was watching, she didn't care to see it. She had her phone propped up against the water carafe, recording a reel. I could see the caption on screen even before she hit post. Year 18, finally free. It was our anniversary dinner. 18 years married. I still remembered her in her green Converse sneakers at that gas station in Utah, talking about saving stray dogs. The woman across from me now? She'd trade a stray for a brand collab any day of the week. She thought I'd beg, or plead, maybe cry. What she didn't realize, what she never bothered to realize, was that for the past 3 years, I've been quietly moving puzzle pieces into place. You don't live with a narcissist that long without learning how to breathe quietly, how to smile while bleeding. You also learn the most dangerous thing a man can do is wait. Especially a man who owns more than just the house. She believed she was entitled to half the assets, half the savings, half the retirement I'd built. But she never asked questions when I made those late night calls. Never noticed that the trust documents I left on the coffee table weren't theoretical. She'd glance at them, scoff, and go back to editing her videos. Paul's little hobby, she'd say. That hobby now owned everything. I remember the waiter asking me, right before I left, was everything to your satisfaction, sir? I looked at Melissa for a second. She was still holding her glass mid-toast, eyes darting between her phone screen and me like she couldn't decide which reality to live in. I smiled and said, it will be. By the time she realized what I meant, the lock codes had already been changed. The bank manager already had new instructions. And the so-called shared accounts? They were never shared, just masked. Every asset she flaunted online was held in a revocable trust. Every car title had been quietly refiled. Even the lease on her independent business studio, signed by a holding company. Mine. She toasted to her freedom. She had no idea she was toasting to her financial extinction. Melissa woke up like a kid on Christmas morning, except instead of presents, she had comments, likes, and DMs flooding her phone. Overnight, her little announcement had gone viral in her curated little corner of Instagram. The post was simple, a wine glass, a designer suitcase, and the caption, freedom, finally. Kiss-mark victory hand. Her makeup was flawless. She'd taken the photo right after I left the restaurant. Caption already drafted before I'd even paid the bill. That part made me laugh later. She was so sure of the script she thought she was writing. A strong woman finally breaking free from the boring insurance guy. A heroine for the brunch crowd. In her mind, I was going to grovel. Maybe send flowers. Beg her not to leave. Tell her I'd change. That's what her followers expected, too. Comment after comment told her she was so brave, so inspiring, and a total queen. What she didn't expect, what none of them did, was that the moment her little empowerment fantasy took off, her phone screen would go dark. At first, she thought it was a fluke. She tapped it, swiped, nothing. She plugged it into the charger, still nothing. Then the Apple logo flickered and froze. Again and again, she rolled her eyes and muttered something about reading a genius bar call. But then came the real hit. She opened her laptop, trying to log into the joint bank account. The same one she used for weekly spa treatments, boutique shopping, and those business expenses that somehow always ended up at Nordstrom. Invalid password. She tried again. Same result. She clicked forgot password. Access denied. Now the eye roll turned into a sharp inhale. Melissa wasn't used to digital resistance. She called the bank. You could practically hear the irritation in her voice before she even got to the menu options. Yes, hi, this is Melissa Howard. I'm locked out of my account. Ma'am, the representative said after a pause. We're unable to give information to anyone who is not the primary signatory. I'm his wife, she snapped. I am on the account. Another pause. Ma'am, the rep said, more carefully this time. You were removed yesterday at 4:47 p.m. Your access has been revoked by the primary account holder. Silence. Then, what the hell are you talking about? I can give you the number of the branch manager if you wish to speak further. She hung up. A call came through from her assistant at the studio. Melissa tried to answer. The call dropped. She tried again. The phone shut off entirely. She threw it across the room. Her heart was racing now. Not just because she couldn't spend money, but because she couldn't understand how I moved so fast. In her mind, she was the one with initiative. She'd posted her freedom like a victory flag. She expected people to comment, leave him, sis, and for me to be the one looking lost, confused, and pathetic. Instead, she was locked out of everything. She jumped into her car and drove to the bank. She still had her license, after all. Her name had to mean something. The teller looked confused when she arrived. I need to speak to the manager, she said. Regarding, he asked. My joint account, she snapped. The manager came out moments later. Polite. Nervous. I'm sorry, Miss Howard. Without authorization from the primary signatory, I'm unable to provide any information. You know who I am. You've seen me here a dozen times. Yes, but that's irrelevant now. Call him. Call Paul. I'm not leaving until I speak with him. The manager hesitated. She saw it. That flicker of something behind his eyes. Respect? Maybe fear? And that's when it hit her. Not all at once, but like slow poison. I hadn't just let her announce the divorce. I had prepared for it. Every move she made that morning was like running full speed into a wall she hadn't seen was evil. Not because it was hidden, but because she never bothered to look. Her pride made her blind. Outside the bank, her car pinged. Low battery. Then another message appeared on her screen, briefly, before the system crashed again. Primary user access revoked. Contact account administrator. For the first time in years, Melissa wasn't in control of the narrative, and she was starting to realize she'd never really been. By the time Melissa stormed into the branch that afternoon, the sunshine had lost its warmth. She parked crooked across two spaces, yanked the door shut without bothering to lock it, and marched across the sidewalk like the floor owed her an apology. Her hair was perfect, of course. The same over-curated, effort disguised as effortless look she wore for every day. But her eyes were twitchy, jaw too tight. That crack in the armor? It was growing. She walked straight to the front desk and dropped her bag on the counter with a thud. I need to speak to your manager, she snapped, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. A mother with a toddler looked up. An older man near the mortgage window frowned. The young man behind the desk swallowed. Do you have an appointment? Does it look like I need one? She hissed. Just tell him Melissa Howard is here. He knows me. He did. That was the problem. The assistant vanished. A few murmured words through the frosted door. Then out came Charles, the branch manager, a man Melissa had dismissed a dozen times as the little rule freak with the coffee breath. He had the cautious gait of someone approaching a bear trap. Mrs. Howard, he said carefully, I understand you're having trouble accessing certain services. I'm having trouble accessing my own life, she snapped. You locked me out of everything, and your customer service people are useless. You need to fix this now. Charles glanced over his shoulder, as if stalling. As I told you this morning, the accounts in question are controlled by the primary signatory. I'm his wife, she said, enunciating each syllable like it was a courtroom performance. He folded his hands. That's no longer a qualifying status under the current structure. Melissa blinked. The what? He looked pained. A trust entity was enacted last year with controlling authority over all major holders. We are legally bound to follow instructions from the signatory of that entity. And you're telling me I'm not on it. He hesitated. She leaned in, voice sharp. Then calm. Right now, I want to see him say this to my face. And right then, like some cruelly timed hallucination, the bell above the bank's main entrance dinged. Melissa turned, and in walked Paul. Not the khaki-wearing, mild-mannered man she thought she knew. Not the guy who always wore the same watch and muttered through his phone settings like an old man in the bank. This Paul wore a tailored navy suit, tie precisely knotted, shoes polished, no wedding ring, no trace of confusion or hesitation. Just calm, quiet purpose. The kind of man who didn't arrive when summoned, but when it was time. The air shifted. A young woman from the loan desk stood up instinctively. The security guard gave a tiny nod. Melissa stepped back as Paul walked past her without a glance, straight to Charles. "Sir," the manager said quickly, "we're ready to begin." Melissa's voice cracked. "What the hell is going on?" Paul finally looked at her. Not angry, not smug, just tired. "I told you," he said, voice low. "Good luck tomorrow." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She couldn't piece it together, couldn't process the sudden reversal. The man she'd mocked for years, called boring, obsolete, just a pension with legs, was now speaking a language of power she didn't understand. And worse, everyone else in the room did understand it. Charles handed Paul a clipboard. Paul didn't hesitate. He signed something, nodded, and began discussing transfer documentation with 3 staff members who had suddenly appeared. Melissa recognized none of them. She had assumed she knew everyone Paul worked with. After all, she thought he was some quiet retiree from the boring side of insurance. What she never bothered to ask, never cared enough to research, was what I actually did. She missed the quiet name change on the LLC filings 3 years ago. Never noticed the corporate notices arriving under a holding company she'd never Googled. She thought the leather-bound binder I kept in the study was just legal bedtime reading. The kind of stuff old men pored over before falling asleep to cable news. In reality, that binder contained the operational architecture for the shell companies, trust outlines, and signatures that made me the sole controller of every single asset with her name near it. And the best part? She'd signed off on half of it herself, usually with a distracted smile, and had just told me where to scribble. Now here she stood, in a bank where no one took her seriously, watching the man she thought she knew calmly dismantle the illusion she'd built around herself. She reached for her phone again, still frozen. Her image, for once, couldn't save her, because this wasn't a story she could edit and post. This was reality, and in reality, Paul, the man she'd underestimated for 18 years, wasn't retired. He was just waiting. Melissa slammed the front door so hard the hallway mirror rattled. She kicked off her heels with enough force to send one flying into the wall, then stalked into the living room like a woman ready to wage war against drywall. Her perfectly manicured hand snatched the thick divorce agreement binder off the console table where she'd tossed it weeks ago, back when she thought signing it was just a formality, like submitting a resignation letter you already bragged about on Instagram. She hadn't even read it yet. Why would she? She was the one calling the shots. She had the leverage, the narrative, the followers. Paul was just supposed to go quietly into that long, boring golf cart sunset. Now the document in her hands buzzed like a live wire. She ripped it open, flipping past the main agreement, the clauses she did skim, the ones that looked like the kind of boilerplate lawyers sleepwalk through. Alimony expectations, property divisions, her titles, all familiar, all stuff she chuckled at while sipping Chardonnay and telling her sister, "He just wants out. I'm letting him." But tonight, her fingers stopped cold on a page near the back. It wasn't formatted like the others. It had a blue ink signature, hers. A second, notarized signature, Paul's attorney. And a heading in small, centered text that read, Supplementary Clause C, Discretionary Oversight and Conditional Forfeiture. She squinted, then she read it, and her stomach turned. In the event that asset division is initiated under circumstances deemed reputationally damaging, performative, or publicly derisive, all agreed-upon transfers may be subject to discretionary audit and delay under the authority of the Revocable Estate Trust, hereafter the Trust. There it was, in plain legal language, mocking them all, publicly ridiculing the divorce, turning their separation into a trending reel with wine glasses and hashtags. She'd triggered the clause the moment she said, "Cheers, we're divorcing," on camera, and Paul knew it. She checked the date next to the signatures. It was from the morning after their trip to Colorado Springs, when she handed him a pen and muttered, "Just sign it so we can stop dragging this out." He had looked at her for 3 long seconds, then signed. She had been so smug about it. She told her friends, "He's too old to argue. He just wants to be left alone." No, he just wanted a paper trail. She pulled out her phone, dead, rushed to her laptop, opened Chrome, logged into Instagram, deleted the divorce post, deleted the finally free reel, deleted the video of her friends clinking glasses over "Welcome to Single Hope Cake." Then she opened Facebook, cleared out every status, every sarcastic comment, scrubbed her digital fingerprints like a fugitive at a murder scene. But it was too late. At the bottom of Supplementary Clause C was an addendum. All publicly accessible materials may be submitted as demonstrative evidence to the Trust Council. Retraction does not nullify a fact. He had screenshots. She knew he had screenshots. Probably not just his. Probably timestamped, notarized archive pulls from his lawyer. Paul had always been methodical. She just never respected it. Thought his discipline was a symptom of dullness. Never realized it was armor. Now, every smug caption, every laughing emoji, every passive-aggressive TikTok she made was a blade pointed at her own throat. Her powerful exit? Just Exhibit A. She stumbled to the kitchen, suddenly parched, grabbed a glass from the cabinet, and filled it with water. Her hands trembled. She spilled half of it onto the counter. It wasn't just that she might not get half anymore. The clause opened the door for full reassessment. If the trust decided she'd violated the good faith element, and it was designed to say she had, everything could be paused, reviewed, delayed indefinitely. And discretionary? That meant Paul's legal team held the flag. She could be locked in limbo for months. Years. No house. No studio. No cars. No retirement drawdowns. Melissa slid down the cabinet to the floor, still clutching the glass. She stared at the tile, her breath shallow. For 18 years, she'd assumed she was the smart one. The one who understood leverage, manipulation, optics. She forgot one simple truth. You don't measure intelligence by how loud someone is. You measure it by how quietly they prepare while you gloat. Paul didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just drafted Clause C and waited. The next morning, Melissa woke up before sunrise, not because of ambition, but because she'd spent the night clawing through a rabbit hole of her own making. 3 hours of internet searches, 5 hours of paperwork digging, and half a bottle of Syrah later. She sat slumped in a silk robe at the kitchen island, mascara smudged, laptop glowing, hands still shaking. It started with a name, Rowan Sentinel Holdings, LLC. She'd seen it in the trust clause last night. Thought it was just some shell Paul's lawyer had cooked up. But when she typed it into the public property search site, there it was. The house, titled under Rowan. The Audi she drove to Pilates every Thursday. Rowan. Even the downtown studio where she ran her luxury home decor consultancy. A space she regularly bragged about owning outright, listed Rowan Sentinel Holdings as the property owner. Her name wasn't on a single deed. She blinked, scanned again, still nothing. Rowan Sentinel Holdings had quietly absorbed everything over the course of the last 3 years. All transfers of title with retained usage rights, something Paul once explained at dinner, while she half listened and scrolled through handbag ads. She remembered that night clearly now. She had laughed, actually laughed. Oh, is this your little retirement game, Paul? She teased, sipping wine. You and your invisible empire. So mysterious. He hadn't responded. Just looked at her, blinked once, and said, I prefer quiet assets. She'd rolled her eyes, thought it was cute. The way he obsessed over paperwork, documents, corporate structures, called it old man Tetris. She never once asked what the firm actually did. Turns out, Rowan Sentinel wasn't just a trust vehicle. It was a holding firm, one Paul had formed with airtight governance. It had its own bylaws, its own advisory board, its own council. The paper trail stretched across 3 states and 4 legal jurisdictions. It was legit, and it was absolutely not hers. The only thing Melissa technically owned now was her wardrobe, her unpaid credit card balance, and the tote bag she got as a PR gift from an interior design conference. Everything else had been loaned to her under terms she never read. Terms buried in the updates she waved off whenever Paul emailed her a document with a quick, just click to approve. She clicked, every time, no questions asked. She thought she was giving a nod to some meaningless tax efficiency play. She was signing away the castle one room at a time. The worst part? The revocable trust gave Paul full discretion to retract access to any beneficiary in the event of conflict, misconduct, or Melissa froze at this line. Demonstrated malice or reputational harm. She didn't need a lawyer to translate that. Her posts, her jokes, the wine glass photo, all documented. Last night, the trust had issued an internal notice. She saw the PDF forwarded from an anonymous email. Probably Paul's way of twisting the knife. Beneficiary access revoked. ID. Howard. The date was yesterday. Melissa grabbed her phone, which was finally working again after a forced factory reset, and opened her banking app. Declined. She opened her calendar. The day was stacked with client consults, people she had promised luxury redesigns to, most of them based on her old house's aesthetic. She couldn't even get back inside to snap new photos. She sent a frantic email to her assistant. Pull everything off the site that references the show. Now, then another. Do we still
Hier
have the
geht's links
renderings
um
from
den
the Dunlap
schwarzen
project?
Ford.
Use
Die
those
beiden
instead.
haben sich
She
vorhin
paused.
schon
That project
begegnet.
was in Paul's name
Und
too.
zwar war
So
da
was the licensing. She had nothing.
Geschwindigkeitsbegrenzung, da ist
No
der
anchor.
Ford
No leverage.
vorbeigefahren.
Not even a
So,
fake
dann
narrative
war
left to cling to. She
Geschwindigkeitsbegrenzung
clicked through the public business
aufgehoben
database
und
again.
Anon
Rowan Sentinel
hat den
Holdings had a
Schwarzen
board
wieder
listing.
überholt.
6
Von
names.
hinten
She
ran
recognized none of them.
und fährt
Paul's
das
name
Video
wasn't
los.
even on there. That's when it really hit her. This wasn't a last-minute act of revenge. This wasn't a panic move from a humiliated husband. This was a strategy, executed years in advance. The trust had been growing, absorbing, and filing while she danced in front of phone cameras and planned her public exit. Paul didn't just plan for divorce. He planned to leave nothing behind when she walked away. She got the show. He kept the stage, the rights, the lighting equipment, and the lease on the theater. Melissa stared blankly at her own reflection in the dark screen. All her life, she assumed she was the smartest one in the room. Turns out, the quietest man at the table had been building a fortress while she was bragging about stealing the key. The spa receptionist smiled as Melissa handed over the gleaming platinum card with her signature rose gold manicure. Let's keep the steam room for an extra hour, she said breezily, flipping her sunglasses up onto her head. She needed this. A deep tissue massage, a facial, maybe a glass of cucumber champagne in the garden lounge. Something to reset her energy, refocus her power, remind herself who the hell she was. Then came the beep. The card terminal blinked red. The machine chirped. Denied. Sorry, could you try that again? Melissa said with a laugh too loud to be real. Probably a chip error. The receptionist tried again. Same result. Melissa leaned in, whispering, run it as credit. The woman looked uncomfortable. It says account restricted. Melissa blinked. That's the shared account. Run it again. Ma'am, the woman began, but Melissa was already pulling out her phone. She dialed customer service. Her nails tapped the counter. Yes, hi. I'm calling about a declined card that. Yes, my name is Melissa Howard. My husband and I share this account. A pause. Ma'am, the agent replied. You were removed from that account as of 3 days ago. No, that's not right. This is our main account. Not anymore. Melissa hung up mid-sentence. She stormed out of the spa, robe flapping, heels clacking against tile. She reached her car, her sleek, white Mercedes convertible, and yanked the door open. The digital dashboard flashed a warning. Vehicle requires verification. Owner override in place. She tried to start it. Nothing. She slammed the door. Are you kidding me? Then she noticed the name on the registration in the glove box. Paul W. Howard. Not hers. Never was. She grabbed her bag and marched 5 blocks to the bank, sweating through her overpriced workout set. When she got there, she slapped her palm on the glass entrance to get someone's attention. Inside, Charles, the manager, spotted her. He came to the door himself. I need access, she hissed. All of this, he's freezing everything. He opened the door just enough to speak. I'm sorry, Miss Howard. I told you, the accounts are under review by the Trust's legal division. Access is frozen until the audit concludes. What audit? It's standard protocol following the clause trigger. You should have been notified by now. Clause? What clause? He didn't answer. Just looked at her like a man watching someone drown in a pool they bragged about diving into. She spun and stormed away, dialing Paul's number. Straight to voicemail. Texted, you can't do this. She paced in front of the floors to cross the street, jaw clenched, thumbs flying. Another text. This is financial abuse. I will tell everyone. You look insane. The reply came 30 seconds later. Did, legally. 3 words. Like a bullet through bone. She gasped, fingers curling around the phone. She tried to call again. Straight to voicemail. Fine, she thought. She'd go home. Her real home. The one she'd designed. Painted, filmed tours of for her followers. She flagged a rideshare and directed it to the gated neighborhood. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror a few times, probably clocking her wild expression and smeared mascara. When she arrived, she stepped out and punched the gate code. Access denied. She tried again. Access denied. She rang the call box. No answer. After 5 full minutes, a neighbor drove in and Melissa slipped through the gate behind them. She reached the front door and grabbed the knob. Locked. She bent down, reached under the flower pot. Gone. No spare key. She circled to the side door near the patio. Locked. She grabbed a stone from the garden edge and seriously considered shattering the window, but something in her paused. Not because she feared consequences. Because for the first time since this spiral began, she realized she didn't even know what she still had. She sat down on the front steps, legs shaking. Inside that house was everything she thought she controlled. Her walk-in closet, her designer kitchen, her custom bathtub, her fake ferns, her curated lighting, her lifestyle. But the locks were changed. The ownership was changed. And she was just another woman sitting on someone else's porch, begging to be let back into a dream she didn't build. She stared at the door. The door didn't move, and neither did Paul. He didn't answer, didn't argue, didn't shout. He just removed her one system at a time, not out of malice, but with the same quiet precision she used to curate her fake perfect life. The erasure wasn't emotional. It was systematic. She'd become a ghost in her own story, and she was only now realizing it had never really been hers to begin with. Melissa had just finished her third espresso of the morning. Though finished meant spilling most of it down her wrist during a frenzied attempt to access yet another locked platform. When her divorce attorney, Nolan, stormed into her condo uninvited. She hadn't seen him this flustered since he fumbled the settlement for her previous business partnership, the one she swore she'd recover from by marrying better next time. His tie was crooked, his face pale. He dropped his leather briefcase onto her marble island like it owed him money. "You didn't tell me about the trust," he barked. She blinked, stunned by his tone. "Excuse me." He pulled out a manila folder, slapped it on the counter, and leaned over it like a man presenting a murder weapon. "Or the postnup he filed 2 years ago." Melissa's mouth fell open. "What postnup?" Nolan opened the folder with the sort of aggressive precision normally reserved for courtroom theatrics. Inside was a high-resolution scan of a contract, complete with notary seal, attorney countersignature, and her own loopy, performative signature at the bottom, adorned with a little heart over the I in Melissa. She stared at it like it was a forged document. Some kind of joke. "I've never seen this," she said, though the sentence sounded weak even to her. "You signed it," Nolan snapped. "Right after that trip to Sedona, 2 years ago." "That's impossible," she said, hands already shaking. "I would have remembered." "You didn't read it," he cut in. He sent it via DocuSign under the subject line, Household Financial Updates. "You clicked it, signed it. You were in the spot. I checked the timestamp. 5 minutes after you posted a boomerang from that cliffside mud bath." Melissa's lips parted. Her heart pounded. Suddenly she did remember. That day, the lavender robe, her second mimosa. Paul had texted her something like, "Need this signed before Friday." She was annoyed. She was oily from a sea salt wrap. She wanted to go back to scrolling through throw pillow samples for the studio's rebrand. So she signed. Never looked. Never asked. Nolan tapped the document. "This voids every community property claim. Everything." Her voice cracked. "That can't be legal." "Oh, it's legal," he replied, pulling out another page. "Because your signature is here, and here, and again here, initial, the notary stamp, done remotely, approved by your existing estate lawyer, whose retainer you terminated last year because you didn't like her tone." Melissa grabbed the page, skimming it with blurry eyes. It was all there. Cold, clinical, clean. Clause 4.1. In the event of separation or divorce, any property titled under a trust or corporate entity will remain the sole legal asset of the designated holder. Clause 4.3. Spouse acknowledges and accepts that no claim may be made against the above entities in any future action. Clause 4.7. The agreement supersedes any previous assumption of shared asset rights under local marital property laws. She looked up at Nolan, barely breathing. "Why didn't you catch this?" she asked, voice thin. "I can't catch documents you never told me existed." He shot back. "Do you even know how many of your assets were held under trust at the time of your signature?" She didn't. Of course she didn't. Paul had been managing things. She'd been filming Get Ready With Me videos in silk pajamas. The legal side of their marriage was always his job. She was the face. He was the spine. She assumed the spine didn't matter when you were pretty enough. "You've been operating under the assumption you'd get half," Nolan continued. "Half the house, half the cars, at least partial equity from the studio lease. But guess what? You don't own the studio. You don't own the cars. You don't even own the website domain your design brand runs on. That's registered under one of his holding firms, and the admin email is his attorney's." Melissa gripped the edge of the counter. "Fix it," she said quietly. "I can't fix it," he said, throwing his hands up. This wasn't some careless misstep. This was a full legal trap. You walked into it in a cloud of eucalyptus steam and signed the door shut behind you. She dropped onto a bar stool, staring at the folder like it might catch fire. 2 years ago. That was back when she still thought Paul was harmless. A little boy, a little gray around the edges. She used to call him the human retirement plan. Set it behind his back at brunch. Thought she was so clever. But while she was
Dennis
laughing with
Opel
friends
sagt,
over
in einem
overpriced eggs
Café
Benedict, he
saß
was
der
locking down the
Besitzer und
perimeter
hat
of their
sich
empire,
amüsiert,
brick
wie
by
wir uns
brick.
hier
Now she was the
rumquälen.
one trapped inside
Jetzt will
it.
aber
No
plötzlich
weapons,
links
no
dieser
map, and
schwarze
worst of all,
Wagen, der hat
she'd built the
gesehen, dass
cage
wir weg
herself
wollen,
with a
will
single,
jetzt unsere
careless click.
Parklücke
The
haben
call came in just
und
after noon.
plötzlich
Melissa
hat's
was
der
sitting on the floor of her
Fortfahrer
studio,
eilig.
surrounded by fabric swatches and overpriced candles she used for staging. A cappuccino sat untouched beside her, the foam slowly collapsing like the rest of her week. She answered on the second ring,
Ja,
forcing a smile into her
der
voice the way she
Schwarze, der
always did.
jetzt
Hi,
daneben
Janice.
steht und
Silence.
zuerst da
Then,
war zum
Melissa, we're pulling
Einparken,
out. The words
meinst du,
landed
der
like a
darf
slap.
jetzt in unsere
Wait, what?
Parklücke?
We're
Nö,
canceling the Newton remodel.
nö.
Effective immediately.
Der
Melissa blinked, stunned.
Sophia
That's a 6-month
fährt
project.
einfach ein Stück
You signed a
vor
design agreement.
und
We're
dann
in phase
parkt er.
2. The
Und der
tile's
andere kann
already.
sehen, wo er
Janice
bleibt.
cut her off.
Geil.
We've spoken to legal. There's an exit
Doppelt
clause.
asozial.
Melissa stood
Erst war
slowly,
asozial mit
gripping
dem
the edge of the
Einparken.
desk. Why?
Wahrscheinlich
Another
mit
pause.
Absicht,
Then came the real
damit wir
blow.
nicht einfach
There's chatter,
wegfahren
Janice
können,
said carefully.
damit er
Online,
genug Zeit
people
hat, zu
saying you
reagieren
misrepresented
und zu seinem
ownership
Auto
of the
zu
design
kommen.
space. That your business
Weißt du?
is entangled in
Also,
legal
es ist schon
disputes.
alles
There's a
komplett
rumor about a
berechnet
trust taking
gewesen.
over your
Das
assets.
ist sehr
And something about
asozial,
fraud.
ja.
Melissa's throat tightened. None of that is true. Janice exhaled, weary.
Also,
I wanted to believe that. But our
Video
CFO
schon
found the
wieder.
property
Wir werden
registry
hier
this morning.
rechts überholt,
You don't own the
gell?
studio.
Ja.
Rowan Sentinel Holdings
Und
does.
der PKW
The same entity
überholt
listed
auch
in
den
multiple
nächsten
asset
da
freezes
vorne
across the
rechts.
state. That's your husband's company, right? Ex-husband.
Ja, guckt's
She
euch
wanted to
an.
scream it, but
Für
the
mich
word
sieht
caught
das
in
so
her
aus,
mouth.
als würde der
You
Weiße
told us this
auch
space
Gas
was
geben,
yours.
weil er
Janice
keinen Bock
continued,
hat, da
voice
den
colder
rechts
now.
vorbeizulaufen.
You said you bought it outright. That it was your creative home. It is, Melissa insisted. I run it. You run it, Janice repeated. But you don't own it. There's a difference. And we can't risk being dragged into someone else's collapse. The line went dead. Melissa stared at her phone for a long time before letting it slide from her hand onto the rug. Collapse wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was happening. By 3 p.m., 3 more clients had postponed their projects indefinitely. One had already submitted a PayPal claim demanding a refund for an in-progress mood board. Another asked her assistant if Melissa was currently being investigated. The whispers in the design community spread fast, faster than any marketing campaign she ever ran. She lied about owning the property. She's being sued for fraud. She's broke. Worse than broke, exposed. People didn't want trendsetters with lawsuits. They wanted clean aesthetics, inspiring captions, and the illusion of success. Melissa no longer fit the brand. She pulled up the lease agreement on her iPad, prepared to cancel before things got worse, before someone sued her, before this whole thing became a spectacle. The document was sleek, PDF signed, and labeled Property Occupancy and Branding Agreement, Studio 4A. She scrolled to the signature page. There it was. Landlord, Rowan Sentinel Holdings, LLC. Tenant, Melissa Howard, occupancy license only. She stared. License only. No lease. No rental rights. No tenant protections. She hadn't noticed before. Paul had handled it all, back when she said, I don't do paperwork. Just make it nice and simple for me. He had. Too simple. She scrolled further. Clause 8. Licensor retains the right to revoke occupancy at will with 15 days notice should the licensee be found in breach of reputational conduct standards outlined in Section 6. She clicked Section 6. One line stood out in bold. Licensee shall not engage in public conduct that damages the professional reputation of the licensor or associated entities. Every post, every video, every snide caption with Paul's name veiled in sarcasm suddenly lit up in her memory like a minefield. This wasn't just a clause. It was a tripwire. She tried calling the trust's legal office. A woman answered in a monotone voice. Yes, Miss Howard. Your access license is scheduled to be revoked within 10 business days. You'll receive official notice by courier. I recommend beginning the relocation process. Melissa laughed, or maybe choked. It was hard to tell. Relocate to where? That's outside our purview, the voice said. We only administer property rights. And just like that, the studio was gone. Not in fire, not in scandal, in silence. She stood in the center of her empire, the space she'd posted, filmed, and bragged about for years. The place she called her sanctuary. It no longer belonged to her. It never had. The photos on her website? Staged in a space that wasn't hers. The brand she sold? Built on rights she didn't read. The empire she flaunted? Constructed on borrowed land. And the owner just called it in. Melissa sank onto the velvet couch under the gold-framed print that read Manifested. The irony almost made her laugh again. Almost. Melissa was curled up in her mother's guest bed, knees tucked under a throw blanket that smelled like lavender and age. Her once flawless nails were chipped, her phone on its last 6% battery. For 2 days, she'd been living like a fugitive in her own life. Crashing at the condo she once called a backup plan, surrounded by floral wallpaper and porcelain angels that made her itch. Her mother had gone silent, tired of the drama, tired of the legal this, trust that, tired of the daughter who once walked with her nose in the air but now paced the kitchen like a raccoon on Adderall. When the phone lit up, she almost didn't answer. Restricted number. She hesitated. Swiped. Hello. Ms. Howard, a clipped voice said. This is Rena Keller, Property Management for the Edgehill Senior Complex. I'm calling regarding Unit 3B, the condo listed under your mother's name. Melissa sat up straight. What about it? We've received instructions from Rowan Sentinel Holdings regarding the lien on the property. They're moving forward with reassignment. I don't understand. That place is my mother's. What does Paul have to do with that? Another pause. The original down payment was issued through a discretionary trust associated with Mr. Paul Howard. The lien was registered accordingly. We've received documents authorizing its transfer. Melissa's throat tightened. Transfer to what? To the holding firm. Effective immediately, utility coverage has been suspended. Water and electric will be discontinued within 5 business days unless alternate arrangements are made. You can't do that. You can't just freeze us out. My mother is, she's. Ms. Howard, I recommend securing alternate housing within the 30-day notice period. This isn't personal. It's a financial reassignment. Melissa gripped the edge of the bed, her voice trembling. You're making me homeless. I'm simply following legal protocol. The call ended before she could respond. She sat there, mouth open, disbelief flickering into something far darker. She went to text Paul, fingers stabbing at the screen. Me? You sick bastard. This is my mother's home. SHE has nothing to do with this. Nothing came back. Not for hours. Not until dusk painted the walls in blue-gray shadows, and her reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a woman who hadn't slept in a month. Then, ping. A message. From Paul. Just one. I gave you the keys. You turned them into weapons. I just took them back. Her thumb hovered above the screen. She wanted to scream, to throw the phone into the drywall, to storm into whatever office he was hiding in and demand to know how he could be this cold. She wanted to say it wasn't fair, that he was being vindictive, cruel, punishing her for things she didn't mean. But what could she say that didn't echo with hypocrisy? She'd celebrated the divorce before it was even real. She turned it into a performance, turned him into a punchline. She'd made memes, reels, group chats mocking the old man still stuck in analog. And now the old man had outplayed her in the one language that never went out of style, legal infrastructure. She'd lived in luxury built on his silence. Assumed silence meant weakness. Assumed kindness meant blindness. Assumed she'd be the one walking away with the bags and the narrative. Now, all she had were headlines in her own mind. Designer evicted. Divorce queen loses studio, condo, and control. She stood in the kitchen of her mother's condo, where a single light bulb flickered like it was already preparing to go dark. No spa day would fix this. No client to pivot to. No platform left to spin her side of the story. She opened the fridge, empty. She opened the freezer, just her mother's frozen peas and a tray of old ice. She grabbed the bottle of white wine from the counter, half gone, warm, and bitter, and poured it into a mug. Sat down on the floor, pulled the blanket tight. In her ears, the silence screamed. She had run the show for so long. Now she couldn't even keep the lights on. The bank's floor-to-ceiling windows cast long shadows across the polished tile as Melissa stood at the front desk, disheveled and trembling. Her designer scarf was twisted unevenly around her neck, mascara streaked down both cheeks, and the heels she once wore like armor now clicked like desperation. She wasn't a woman walking in with purpose. She was someone hoping the building wouldn't notice her shame. I need to speak with Paul Howard, she said, voice cracking halfway through. Please, I'm here to settle. The manager, Charles, emerged from the office again. Same man, different look. Less hesitant this time, almost resigned. As if he'd been briefed in advance on exactly how this would go. Please have a seat, he said gently. I believe he's on his way. She didn't sit. She paced. Her phone was almost dead again. She didn't care. Her mother had stopped answering calls. Her assistant had quit via a single-line email. Her website was down.
Ich
The
erzähle ja
studio's
wieder nur
Instagram
alte
had been quietly
Kriegsgeschichten.
deactivated,
Syrinx ist
probably
dahin
by Paul's
gelaufen
team
oder
after the occupancy
Cyrix, deckt
revocation.
euch was
Every
aus.
digital
Der
thread she
Fahrer
had once
saß
wrapped around herself
geschockt
was
hinter
frayed
seiner
and floating
Karre,
away.
konnte
And
kein
still,
Deutsch
she believed,
und
hoped,
ja,
that if she
dann hat
just spoke to
Cyrix
Paul
dann hier
face to
auch nicht
face,
mehr
she could
rauskriegen.
rewind some of the
Aber
damage.
super
Cry a
krass,
little,
der
maybe pull a sympathy
LKW-Fahrer auf
string
der
or
anderen
two.
Seite, der hat
Remind him of the
genauso,
early
wie ich dann
days.
eben schon
Show she
sagte,
wasn't the villain.
der hat
Then
genauso
the glass
heute
doors
nochmal
opened,
Geburtstag.
and there he was,
Wäre der
not with swagger,
durchgeschossen, der
not with
LKW,
smugness,
der wäre
but in
ja
that same
rüber in
tailored
den
suit,
Weißen. Der hätte ja
that same
nirgendwo
calm
mehr
walk,
hingekonnt.
that same
Da wäre der
silence
weiße
that,
LKW da auch
now, she
reingeschossen.
finally
Ich
understood
kriege
wasn't
Gänsehaut,
emptiness,
wenn ich
it
da
was
nur von
power.
rede.
The kind of
Könnt ihr nicht
power
sehen,
that doesn't
ist
need
aber
to
so.
shout because everything has already been handled. Her breath caught in her throat. Paul nodded to Charles, who stepped
Vorsicht,
aside.
Vorsicht,
The room seemed to pause. Charles asked, "Sir, shall we proceed with the transfer authorization?" Paul looked over at Melissa for the first time. Not at her, exactly, through her. "No need," he said softly. "We're already in full control." Melissa's heart dropped. Her lips parted. "What do you mean we?" Before the question could hang too long, another figure appeared at the door. A woman in a black sheath dress, hair pinned tightly, carrying a leather binder. She walked in with authority, not confidence, but command. The kind of presence that told you she didn't bluff. She had no need. She stopped beside Paul, opened the binder, and spoke. "Ms. Howard," she said, tone neutral, surgical. "As of 9:17 a.m. this morning, per signed instruction and verified action by the managing board of Rowan Sentinel Holdings, you have been formally and permanently removed from all financial accounts, real estate properties, asset trusts, occupancy licenses, operating business agreements, and affiliated access systems." Melissa felt her knees weaken. The woman continued, unaffected. "All passwords, authorizations, proxies, and platform credentials have been revoked. Additionally, a notice has been sent to your credit partners
Bist
to
jetzt
suspend
wieder wach?
pending transactions tied to legacy accounts you formerly accessed. You are no longer a beneficiary, signatory, or affiliated
Schnell
party
den
to
Daumen
any
hoch
of
drücken,
Mr.
bevor
Howard's
das Video
holdings." The words were clean, clinical. Melissa gripped the marble edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. You can't do this," she whispered. "You can't just erase me." Paul didn't answer. The attorney simply closed her binder and nodded once to the manager, then to Paul. And that was it. Melissa looked at Paul, trying to find anything in his face. Pity, rage, regret. Nothing. Just the quiet man she once dismissed, once underestimated, once mocked over dinner while filming a TikTok about men who confuse money with control. Turns out, she'd misunderstood everything. Paul didn't confuse money with control. He understood it. And while she had spent months creating a narrative, likes, posts, hashtags, champagne toasts, he had spent years building a system. One that could withstand her ego. One that waited. Silently. And then, when she lit the match, quietly watched her burn the bridge she assumed was hers. No raised voice. No vengeance speech. Just procedure. Final. Unyielding. She stood in the middle of the branch, customers walking around her, the buzz of office phones and quiet conversations all bleeding together
Auch noch
into a muffled
jemand
drone. Paul turned and walked toward the
ein
door.
paar
Melissa took a step after him, reaching, not even knowing why. He didn't look back,
Anti-Rutschmatten.
not once. And that, more than anything, told her it was over. Not the marriage, not the money, not the life. Her. She was gone, and he'd already deleted the backup.